In this lesson, we'll talk a little bit more about using 3D layers. So 3D layers will allow us to add detail that we may want to modulate or take off later on. So it's a very flexible tool to work with. So what that means is if we select our subtool and we go down to layers in our tool palette, so right below geometry here, you can see we already have one layer, and this actually contains that detail that we added in as far as the stretching of the head, kind of the pose that we added. Okay, so we've got this layer selected here. We can come in and we can duplicate that layer, we can delete the layer, we can invert it, and we can rename it. So let's go ahead and name this something like pose. And you can see there's a little eye next to it, so I can turn that off and on. I can also dial down the strength of it. So it's not, doesn't have to be a 0 to 1 thing. I can have a little bit of that layer, or I can have that dialed all the way up. So to create a new layer, if we want to create some detail that we're not sure if we want to keep, maybe we want to experiment a little bit. So what we can do here is turn on a new layer or activate a new layer. Now you can see that when we have this little dot turned on, it says REC. So we're recording now, sculpting in this particular layer. So let's say that we want to come in here with our standard brush, drag rectangle, and let's get this alpha 24, and we'll use Z, add kind of a smaller draw size, and yeah, Z add I think will work. We'll turn up the intensity a little bit so we can see it. And so let's say we want to add some detail like this, and we want to kind of experiment. Well, once we get it in there, say, you know, that's actually too much. I don't really want that. So what we can do is dial it down a little bit. We'll turn off record. Now I'm going to dial down the strength of it. Okay, if I take it down to 0, it's going to be the way it was before I ever painted on it. So you can see, well, that's a little better. I can look at it again without the detail on, so I can hit the little eye, turns that detail off. Okay, if I want to get rid of this layer, I can go ahead and delete it, and you can see all that detail is gone. Okay, so the detail is not added to the actual geometry apart from the layer until we bake it down. Okay, so we can use these to really quickly, add some experimental type detail here. That's not really what we want, so we'll change our alpha here. Really want to get some bumps going on. We can create a new layer apart from that and say, yeah, and aside from those bumps, I also want to come in here and manually draw out some details. So I want to come in here and kind of draw out some scales or whatever it is. Add some detail to that, and then maybe smooth off the tops of it. And so you can end up having a combination of multiple layers here. So I can select this particular layer. Now I have other options here for merging down. So if I merge down, that's going to merge the detail that I had in that first layer with the last layer. So now all that detail is contained on one single layer. The pieces that I sculpted and also the noise that I painted in. Okay, we can dial it back in. And then if we don't like it, we can go ahead and delete it. Now here, I'm going to actually keep this layer just in case I want to go back and do something symmetrically. Okay, but if you don't want to keep it, all you have to do is bake it, and it'll bake all your layers down into your model. Then you won't have those layers available, and whatever changes were happening on that layer will be baked into the geometry, and that's what your geometry will look like from then on. Okay, so you can see there's opportunity to add multiple layers. You can again merge those down together, and you can also change the opacities of those and how those are affected. So affect your model. So you really get a lot of flexibility out of using 3D layers. It's a way of just adding detail without having to destroy the underlying mesh. So you've got something symmetrical, maybe you want to come in and add some asymmetrical detail on a layer so that you can turn it off if you need to, instead of having to go back to an earlier iteration. You have a lot of flexibility here. So make sure to check out layers when you're working with your models in ZBrush. They again provide a ton of flexibility in how you create your models. So next, let's take a look at using fiber mesh to create some sort of hair and fur looking pieces here in ZBrush. It really adds a lot to your models, and it looks really, really good too. So let's go ahead and take a look at how to use fiber mesh in the next lesson.